Probably somewhere on a tree, on a forest, I guess.
They are live.
Okay. Okay, Bismillah. Fourth point, the second hand, minute hand, hour hand, and day hand of a clock, which tells the weeks look to one another, are examples of one another, and follow one another. The second hand, minute hand, hour hand, and day hand of a clock, which tells the weeks look to one another, are examples of one another, and follow one another. Similarly, the alternations of day and night, which are like the seconds of the world, of this world, a vast clock of Almighty Allah, and the years which tell its minutes, and the stages of man's lifespan, which tell the hours, and the epochs of the world's lifespan, which tell the days, look to one another, are examples of one another, resemble one another, and recall one another. So there are multiple time, let's say, periods, right? And then there is a similarity between the time that we are following and the time of this world. And they all follow each other. Just like the seconds pass, the hours also pass, and the weeks, and for the world, it's ages and days and things like that. And there are a lot of connections with the prayer times that we have to these different times of different time frames. For example, the time of Fajr, the early morning, this time until sunrise resembles and calls to mind the early spring, the moment of conception in mother's womb, and the first the first of the 6 days of the creation of the heavens and the earth. It recalls the divine acts present in them. So I will keep reading until the end, and we can go back if you like to discuss, if that's okay. The time of Zuhur, just past midday, this resembles and points to midsummer and the prime of youth and the period of man's creation in the life of the world, and calls to mind the manifestations of mercy and the abundant bounties they contain. The time of Asr, afternoon, this is like autumn and old age, and the time of the final prophet Muhammad ﷺ, known as the era of bliss, and recalls the divine acts and favors of all merciful present in them. The time of Maghrib, sunset, by recalling the departure of many creatures at the end of autumn, and human death, and the destruction of the world at the commencement of the resurrection, this time puts in mind the manifestations of divine glory and sublimity, and rouses man from his slumbers of heedlessness. The time of Isha, nightfall, as for this time, it calls to mind the world of darkness, veiling all the objects of daytime world with a black shroud, and winter hiding the face of the dead earth with its white cerement, and even the remaining works of departed man dying and passing beneath the veil of oblivion, and this world, the arena of examination, being shut up and closed down forever, and this proclaims the awesome and mighty disposals of all the all glorious and compelling subduer. As for the nighttime, through putting in mind both the winter and the grave and the intermediate realm, it reminds man how needy is the human spirit for the most merciful one's mercy. And the tahajjud prayer, that's midnight, or after even midnight, close to the Fajr time, prayers informs him what a necessary light it is for the night of the grave and darkness of the intermediate realm. It warns him of this, and by recalling the infinite bounties of the true bestower, proclaims how deserving he is of praise and thanks. And the second morning calls to mind the morning of the resurrection. For sure, however reasonable and necessary and certain the morning of this night is, the morning of the resurrection and the spring following the intermediate realm are certain to the same degree. That is to say, just as each of these 5 times marks the commencement of an important through the awesome daily disposals of eternally besought one. Oh, I missed a line, I guess. That is to say, just as each of these 5 times marks the commencement of an important revolution and recalls other great revolutions. So through the awesome daily disposals of the eternally besought one's power, each calls to mind the miracles of divine power and gifts of divine mercy of both every year and every age and every epoch. That is to say, the prescribed prayers, which are an innate duty and the basis of worship and an incontestable debt, are most appropriate and fitting for these times. So this is the end of 4th point. So shall we go back and to the beginning and discuss a little bit, if you like to? Colin Hocam, were you here last week? I guess you were also absent, right? I wasn't here. You were not attended.
Sorry, I wasn't here last week or the week before.
Okay, yeah, me either. So let's discuss. Maybe Nejat Abi wants to chime in and share what has been discussed the previous week, and we can continue from there. But this is an important chapter, yeah, in Risale-i Nur. You know, we try to pray 5 times a day. All Muslims around the world, millions of people, and we know it's important and it is ordained by Allah, commanded by Allah, and we do it for the sake of Allah. But many Muslims, including ourselves, we don't contemplate on the timings as much, and we don't see the necessity of praying 5 times, and what's the wisdom behind praying 5 times a day, and what is the particular situation that relates to those particular times. So Ustad breaks it down, the wisdom and its relation to the life of the world and the life of the universe and the things that happens inside in particular time periods, the creation of Allah, how does it work? And so let's try to discuss and understand as much as we can, as Ustad explains here. So let's read from the beginning again. The second hand, minute hand, hour hand, day hand of a clock, which tells the weeks, look to one another, are examples of one another, and follow one another. Similarly, the alternations of day and night, which are like the seconds of this world. So there is the second hand of a clock, and the second hand of this world clock resembles the days and nights, the changes, the alternations of days and nights. So this is a vast clock of Almighty Allah. And the years resembles the minutes. And the stages of man's lifespan are like the hours, and the epochs of this world's lifespan, which tell the days, look to one another, are examples of one another, resemble one another, and recall one another. So there is a resemblance between the human's clock and Allah's universal clock. So, for example, the time of Fajr, the early morning, this time, would you like to share until this part, Colin Hocam or Necati Hocam? Anything particular?
I think last week we really read and discussed this part, but
Okay.
because except both of you, I guess everyone already know that. So my suggestion is that you're ready to kind of refresh, and I suggest that Colin Abi gives his insight, particularly why there's an analogy, because the general understanding, we had discussion on that, I think, last week. So, but I think everyone get their own insight from every part. So, a unique insight. So, what I would really, I think, be beneficial if both of you share what is the unique insight, from that part that when you really reflect on it. Otherwise, the general discussion, I think we went through that. If we don't do that, I think we're gonna only be able to cover this topic again. And if we have different people next week, then we're gonna cover next topic, the next week the same topic, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So, unless Colin Hocam, you want to share something, I will keep reading. Would you like to?
Bismillah. Maybe we can talk about the creation as a kind of holograph, if you wish. Something which is a whole, a perfect whole in a sense, an irreducible whole. And as we know, I don't really know too much about holographs, but I know that on the holographic plate, every part of the holograph is a reflection of the whole holograph, unlike a photograph. With a photograph, the parts of the photograph are just parts, but in a holograph, every part of the holograph reflects the whole of the holograph. And in a sense, creation is an irreducible whole. And therefore, when you look at a part of creation, you can see the whole of that, whole of the creation. And everything reflects everything else. So if we think of what Ustad is doing here with the clock, there is a second hand, a minute hand, an hour hand, and a day hand. They're all sweeping round at different speeds, and they're all describing circles. And so therefore, basically, they are all doing the same thing, but from different perspectives and in different ways, and they reflect each other. So if you look at one day, a 24-hour day, what happens in that day is similar to what happens in a year. And what happens in a year is similar to what happens in a lifetime, in a human lifetime. So in a day, we have the morning. In a year, we have the spring. And in a human lifetime, we have childhood. So these are all reflections of each other. In the day, we have the noon, the midday, the zuhur. In the year, we have the summer, where everything reaches its, a peak of perfection. And in the human life, then we have adulthood and middle age, and so on. So, the day is cut into sections, if you wish, and portions, and so is the year, and so is the human life, and also so is the life of the earth, of human civilization as well. So these all reflect each other. So what happens in the morning also happens in the spring, and also happens in the childhood of a human being. And this is what Ustad is saying. And he's saying that actually all of this is a reflection of what happens in Malakut. We know Malakut, in Malakut, there is time, a different kind of time, but no space, in a sense. It's not spatial. And the time is very, very different. But what happens in Malakut is in the hidden realm, or the partially hidden realm, is reflected in this world. Because whatever happens in the world where we live, where we exist, in Alam al-Mulk, is a reflection of what happens above it. And when I say above, I don't mean spatially, I mean ontologically above. And this actually, this ninth word, I think is one of the most amazing pieces of writing in Muslim theology ever. Because what Ustad has done, he's mapped the prayers onto these different timed phenomena, you know, the day, the year, the human lifespan, the lifespan of the earth and the lifespan of the universe, if you wish.
Mhm.
And he has mapped onto it, you know, the 5 prayers, which are those very important points in the day, which reflect certain upheavals and revolutions in Alam al-Malakut. And we can only guess at what those are.
Yes.
But they are reflected in our day. And at those points, we are supposed to come out of our slumber of negligence and reconnect with our Creator. Obviously, we're supposed to be connected with Him, you know, in our head, in our heart, throughout the day. But we are weak, we forget, and there are these 5 crucial times during the day. And again, he maps these on to you know, the other timed phenomena, and he does it in an amazing way. And it shows you that everything reflects everything else. The universe, the created realm, is an irreducible whole that is much greater than the sum of its parts, and every part reflects every other part. That's my initial understanding of this.
Yeah, Colin Hocam, you summarized the whole thing very wisely. I guess yeah, I benefited a lot. You know, sometimes I remember discussing, this is similar to what we have read here. It just came to my mind. So the time of humankind, or the time, the flow of time in the universe in general, is not linear. Am I right? So there is a circular
Yeah,
time.
we see it. We imagine that it's linear because
Yes.
of we live in the causal world, and the causal world is this sort of, how can I say, this is it's sort of a linguistic analytical consciousness. We think in a causal level, you know, in a linear way, because we think that causes precede effects. We think that, you know, we move in a linear fashion. We analyze in a linear fashion.
Mhm.
But actually, this is it's a necessary illusion. It helps us to navigate our way through the world. But
Mhm.
you know, horizontally, we think horizontally. But we, as you're right, we need to think vertically as well, because creation is
Mhm.
vertical, and I'm not talking again spatially. You know, when we think cause effect, cause effect, cause effect, actually, it's all effect, effect, effect. And if you think of horizontal and vertical axes, we
Mhm.
think along the horizontal axis because we see a cause and then we see the effect coming afterwards. And that makes us think in a linear way. But
Mhm.
spiritual consciousness is not linear. It's vertical, and it's not horizontal at all, because it's out of time and it's out of space, you know. Our thinking and our analyzing and our belief, actually the belief or the intuition, you know, the intellect of the heart is not a horizontal thing. It doesn't work like that, you know. That analysis, understanding, conviction, all of those things, these are not horizontal phenomena at all.
Yeah. You know, Ustad also gives different analogies regarding life of humankind. You know, in previous words, as far as I remember, you know, there is, Ustad also gives some linear explanation to how human travels through life. So, you know, starting from the womb of a mother, through the world, and then there is death, and there is the bridge, Salat, and it goes to the paradise or hellfire. So sometimes when it's explained in that way, we tend to think it's also linear. So we tend to think that's a general idea of human life is we're gonna die, so in a certain time, and then the afterlife starts afterwards, right? So regarding this explanation of a circular time structure, we are also is it can we say there is a parallel between the afterlife and the life that we live right now, or would it start afterwards?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the circular. I mean, there are some people, some historians who say that history is circular, and maybe there's a certain argument to that. But what we have to, I think, Allah Alam, we have to see vertically, because we look to the sky and we hold our hands up to the sky, and of course Allah is not in the sky, but the fact that there is a sky and a space beyond it, these are representations, these are symbols for us, that Allah is above us ontologically. And Allah creates at every second, and the creation is in a sense vertical. And we have a kind of indication of this when it rains. The rain comes down from the heavens, it comes down from the skies, and it falls onto the ground, and things are grown. So this is a vertical thing. In other words, causality, Allah's causality is vertical in a sense. And this is what we call ibda. So at every moment there is creation, at every moment. And cause does not create effect. Every cause and every effect, actually they're all effects. As we know, Ustad in Tabiat Risale makes this quite clear.
Yes.
So when the match, the lighted match touches the paper, the lighted match is an effect, and the burning of the paper is an effect. But because we see them in time, we think this is a horizontal universe, and we think we don't look up. Science has told us or taught us not to look up, but to look in front. Because it's linear, science depends on us believing in the illusion of cause and effect. So we no longer look up. We have cut off, actually the scientific revolution has severed the vertical links between creation and its creator. And everything has become enfolded within this causal arrangement, cause effect. So we believe very, very firmly in what is an illusion, actually, and this is our misfortune.
I just it just reminded me of the example Ustad gave in, I guess, 23rd word. He passes through a bridge and he's holding a torch in his hand and looking to the end of the bridge, and to the right and to the left, and he sees terrible things. And suddenly he throws the torch to the ground and breaks it, and then the things are enlightened, and the true nature of the things are, he starts to observe the true reality of the things. So science in that way could be that torch. Sometimes it just wants us to, as you just mentioned, it just wants us to see the front in a linear way, and not look in a circular way to the things
That's a
happening.
wonderful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've got this little torch. You can buy. Sometimes when I go out in the dark walking, I have this like woolen hat, and it has a torch in it. So when I'm walking along, I can see where I'm going if I want to walk in the dark. And it's a very weak light. And if we use that weak light to see everywhere, we're going to have problems, actually, because it doesn't see very far. But as soon as Ustad smashes that small light, then the light of revelation lights up everything. And he sees that, this is not a linear thing. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mustafa, but in the 23rd flash, right, which is Tabiat, he also talks about materialists, he has this vision at the end of the 23rd flash, or is it in Anna? I can't remember. They are going through the earth from one side to the other. And he says that very few of them actually get to the other side and reach the truth. Whereas those who, there are elevator-like vehicles which lift people up and take them high over the earth. And of course, this is an analogy of materialism. Materialism doesn't lead you anywhere. It doesn't have an end. Materialism is always looking for, what happened before the Big Bang. So it's again, it's linear, but they're going backwards actually. And there's another reason for that in reality, because it's easier to talk about the past. It's easier to lie about the past, and it's easier to obfuscate about the past because no one can go back there to test it. But the point is, Ustad had the prescience to talk about materialism, over 100 years ago. And he said that, materialism, it's like tunneling under the ground. You go and you go and you go and you go and you get nowhere. And maybe just 1 in 100 people will reach the truth in that way. And I think this is what he was saying then. But here in the 9th word, he's talking really about a different kind of consciousness. And it's not a linear consciousness. It's not an analytical consciousness. It's an intuitive consciousness. It's the consciousness of the heart, really. And we don't have it, unfortunately. We lost it. And the scientific revolution tried to kill it, and has been very successful in not killing it, but wounding it very badly.
Yeah. And it can only be cured through the revelation. And you started explaining.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I spoke too much. I'll
Thank you
leave
so
it
much. It was enlightening. Thank you so much. Necati Hocam, would you like to add on to this? Anything?
Yeah, I think Kolnab explained very well. Just two brief things when he was explaining, that point came to my mind. I think the one is an experience time. In a way, it reminds me this day analogy with clock, and remind me that one verse in Quran, when people die, they were asked, how long did you live on the earth? They will say a day or a part of the day. So in a way, it seems like one lesson in this, that if you consider your whole life just one day, and imagine that you just come to this world and live a day, and you're going to die at the end of day. So in that case, basically, you will, perception of time will make you to pay attention to what's really important, which means that it can help you to really get connected to the Creator, to give the highest priority. So I think one way that is like when you think your life as a day, that you have only a day to live actually. So you will live quite different than when you think that you have a long life, perhaps, eternal, infinite life, or years, hundreds of years. That's how you perceive. So I think that's one thing it says in a way that you kind of, the analogy give here in one way somehow remind us that, this, even you live 100 years, even if you live as long as, let's say, the earth lives, it's like a day anyway, relatively speaking. So that's basically, in a way, that's reminding us that we shall not be deceived with the time. I kind of feel it this, but meanwhile, it says, if you look at it in another perspective, it'll say, even if you have one day life, what you're going to experience in terms of the divine acts and, creation in your one day life is equivalent of living, let's say, thousands of years. Because this is the same things happening. As long as you take advantage of that single day, that you can actually, have experience and understanding of, let's say, the whole hundreds of years of life as well. So that's another perspective to give you, and really remind you the importance of a single day experience that you have in this journey. So then, now, within this, then when you look at the prayer, when you look at the time of prayer, and when you try to see those as a reminder to this, let's say, divine manifestation and divine acts, or what you call it, divine revolutions. So then you will realize, yes, this is a time to go and express your feeling once you have such observation and experience of, let's say, the beauty and perfection, bounties, miraculous acts that manifested. So that your prayer is expression of your feeling as you go through such humanly experience in your daily life. So that's it came to my mind when Kol Nabi was describing very well in terms of how, to understand this analogy, the clock analogy. I think that was really well explained.
Thank you, Nejat Hocam. So this is the Salat times are it's opportunity for us to connect with the eternity somehow, in some ways. We are so transient, just like you explained. It's so, it's just like, they say it was a day or two, or maybe less than a day. So we have a very transient, very short period of time in this life, in terms of worldly life. And Salah times, that's a beautiful bounty for us to connect with Allah, and thus connect with eternity, and with this and reach and access to this larger clocks, and become elevated, and to this eternal life, to the state of eternal life. Maybe, I don't know if I was able to explain with my little English, but so let's go to the fifth point. It's already 30 minutes left. The fifth point: by nature, man is extremely weak, yet everything touches him and saddens and grieves him. Also, he is utterly lacking in power, yet the calamities and enemies that afflict him are extremely numerous. Also, he is extremely wanting, yet his needs are indeed many. Also, he is lazy and incapable, yet life's responsibilities are most burdensome. Also, his humanity has connected him to the rest of the universe, yet the decline and disappearance of things he loves and with which he is familiar continually pains him. Also, his reason shows him exalted aims and lasting fruits, yet his hand is short, his life brief, his power slight, and his patience little. It can barely understood from this how essential it is for a spirit in the state at the time of Fajr in the early morning to have recourse to and present a petition at the court of an all-powerful one of glory, an all-compassionate, all-beauteous one, through prayer and supplication, to seek success and help from him. And what a necessary source of support it is, so that he can face the things that will happen to him in the coming day and bear the duties that will be loaded on him. The time of Zuhur, just past midday, is the time. So should we discuss first and go on, or I guess we have limited time. Maybe we will not be able to finish the whole chapter. So I would, I guess it will be wise to discuss every paragraph. Would it be good? Okay, so going back, by nature, man is extremely weak, yet everything touches him and saddens and grieves him. Also, he is utterly lacking in power, yet the calamities and enemies that afflict him are extremely numerous. Also, he is extremely wanting, yet his needs are indeed many. Also, he is lazy and incapable, yet life's responsibilities are most burdensome. Also, his humanity has connected him to the rest of the universe, yet the decline and disappearance of the things he loves and with which he is familiar continually pains him. Also, his reason shows him exalted aims and lasting fruits, and yet his hand is short, his life brief, his power slight, his patience little. So this is the situation of man.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
I mean, this word halbuki, right? How do you cope with this in Turkish? Because it's so difficult to translate it.
Hmm.
And I don't think this has done a good job here. And
Hmm.
it's like saying, you know, it's like, even though man is extremely weak, you know, even in
Yes.
that, you would think, in other words, you would think that we would get a bit of, you know, a bit of help because we're so weak. And yet we're weak. And yet on top of that, you know, everything touches us and saddens us and grieves us. And I
Yes.
think
Yes, you're right.
this idea, halbuki, doesn't really have a very good, and maybe someone in the among the brothers can suggest how we can
In fact,
express this in English.
would be a better choice, maybe. I don't know. In addition, you know, halbuki, as you just suggested, it's an addition.
Yeah,
You know,
but it's an
this
addition. It's like, you know, it's like you're standing in 3 feet of water already, and then someone pours another 6 feet of water on you.
yes, you're
You
right.
know?
You're right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, how do we say that in English? I haven't found a way
Maybe,
yet. So,
maybe I'll be giving the fact that or something. I don't know. Now, giving the fact that could be a word for that.
yeah, maybe,
But there is,
maybe.
on
I
top
couldn't
of it,
hear all of what Hikmat was saying, though.
on top of it is would it be a good idea? You know, people
Yeah,
say on
yeah,
top of
yeah.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I can express it in Persian with no problem. And obviously you can express it in Turkish with no problem, but I haven't yet found a way of expressing it in English.
You know, sometimes people say explaining a troublesome situation, to add onto it, they say on top of it. This happens.
Yeah, maybe, yeah, maybe you would have to do that, yeah.
Together, maybe together with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, there is an. So Ustad is expressing the comprehensive nature of human beings. You are very weak. At the same time, together, adding besides this, everything is touching us, saddening, grieving us. Yes.
But there's definitely this notion of, you know, on top of this, you know, man is weak. So, you know, but even on top of this, you know, everything touches him and saddens him and grieves him, not because he's weak, but in addition to the fact that he's weak, maybe. In addition to the fact that human beings are weak, everything touches him and saddens him and grieves him. And of course, because we're weak, we can't deal with that, and therefore this is why we need Allah's his fadl, you know, his we make ista'ana to him, you know, we ask for his help, because he creates us weak, and then he gives us all of this grief. It's not because we're weak that we get the grief. The grief is on top, you know, it's extra.
Yes.
Kolnabi, when I was reading, I also thought about translation issue, but I thought another thing. So it's basically, if you look at the first and second sentence, the first sentence talks about human to be extremely weak, and second saying that he is utterly lacking in power. I really don't see that is conveyed a true message, and is really, is you're weak, you're powerless. But it doesn't say in Turkish one. The Turkish one is saying that the first one is a zayif, the second one ajz. So zayif is, I would say, is you are very delicate, very fragile as a human being. So the second one says that you are impotent. So in a sense, you know, I think the second is translated, but the first when I read it, you know, it's like, I'm not sure whether really it does good job in terms of describing human being in terms of za'af, ajz, faqr. Yeah, those are three essential things So, and there is differences between that, and they're not the same thing. But the ways the first and second sentence is formulated, it gave me impression as if they mean quite same thing in terms of being powerless. But the first one is actually zaif means that you're very fragile, very delicate. Any little thing, if I say, you know, a word now, bad word to you, then now I can ruin your day. Yes, that's that
Yeah,
easy.
but I agree with you, Najati, but I think the problem here is, you're right. Zaif and faqir or ajiz, they need to be translated properly. But the problem is yet, because normally in English, I could say, for example, I've got no money, yet I'm very happy, right? But here it's saying, man is very weak, and on top of this, he's touched by everything touches him and saddens him and grieves him, not because he's weak. Yet in English, it seems to connote it's a kind of contradistinction. But Halbuki doesn't mean that. It means, as far as I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, man is weak, and even though he's weak, he gets even extra extra aggravation because everything touches him and saddens him and grieves him, not because he's weak, but on top of that weakness. Now, tell me if I'm understanding Halbuki
I think
incorrectly.
Halbuki means, the way I understand, it's basically is laying. It's like despite all of those, like as if there's nothing like this, as if the person is really in a perfect condition, then he faced this. So in a way, that's saying, you know, it is
Yes,
yeah, paradoxically, it's like that's what not
yes, excellent. Paradoxically, we're weak, and paradoxically, instead of being helped, we're not helped. Everything touches us and saddens us and grieves us. And of course, what this is saying is, because we're weak, we shouldn't think that we can help ourselves, because we can't. But this yet is really disturbing me, because yet suggests we're going to see something completely different. Man is really weak, and yet and nothing harms him, nothing hurts him, but it's the opposite of that, as you said. So there's a paradox there. You would think that yet signifies, okay, so there's going to be something positive now, right? But it's not. It's even worse,
Even if it is not enough, there is more.
Absolutely, yeah. Wasn't it enough that I was hungry, and on top of that, you didn't go shopping for me. You didn't bring anything, and so I was even hungrier. Something like that. That was a bad example, but you know what I mean. Anyway, you know better than me, Halbuki. It's for you. It's innate. This understanding of Halbuki. So you know what I mean. Anyway.
Anyway, let's just go into the meaning there. I want to say something and then see what Kolnabi will say on that. I recently attended a conference, there's on basically, or is a quite old one, it's called Discussing the Self-Determination Theory. Now, there's I think it's at least 20 years old theory, and a lot of, there were like thousands of people joining and presenting paper. But the essential idea here is that I find is because this understanding of the self in this 21st century, it's extremely mistaken, and it's the pharaoh start from the misunderstanding of the self, and in terms of how we really define ourselves as a human. So the essential core idea in this theory is that human essentially has the power to determine his or her own life. So, and essentially there are three needs that we need to really recognize and fulfill. That is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. That is the core of the theory. In a way that you have the power, you need autonomy. You could run your own life, and that it should be given to human being. And you are competent, and you should be told that you're competent, and you should rely on yourself. You should trust on your ability. You should believe in yourself. You could do it if you want. You have unlimited power. Just be aware and unleash that you see. I read like hundreds of books and self-help books, in my life to really somehow get the message, because I was naively thinking that's really necessary for me to motivate myself and to gain confidence, because I thought really I need the self-confidence, until I realized that God confidence is actually what I need to have it. And self-confidence is really a deception. So, and relatedness is the third, but I think that's also reflects, here is mentioned as well in terms of this human need, that you cannot live in isolation. You really need companion. You need to have friendship. You need someone to somehow to establish the human to human connection. So the problem, I think, the way that this idea is becoming extremely dominant, in which that, you know, you can see, even like when I remember in US when I was trying to have kids to really watch something that's not that relatively innocent. There was one kids program, I assume everyone knows, on Arthur. At the beginning and end of it, I will find out they will intentionally make a song and inject the mind of the kids every time, believe in yourself. Okay, but here you see a description of human is like a very delicate baby who cannot do anything, or it's like a completely paralyzed person, but with the consciousness and feeling and desires of everything. So that is, and in this case, is saying that you as a person with such a reality, that now you really need to go to the prayer and to get connected to the divine power to get what you need and what you want in life. So in a way that prayer is mandatory on you, not because that basically, you know, is a required condition in Islam, is mandatory on you because you as a human cannot do it without God, cannot live your life without God. So I want really, Kolnabi, to reflect on that part, to see how really Nursi, in this case, explaining the very necessity of prayer based on the reality of human nature, and then the connection between the two, and in this case, to put the prayer, you know, within that. In a way, I will say, once you have such a realization, you're going to go pray even if it's not mandatory, because how can you do without prayer? I wonder what's your take on this part?
I think when it comes to human beings, the big problem is we think we have money in the bank. If you have money in the bank, you can grow that money, right? Even if it's just leaving it in the bank and allowing it to gain interest. Ustad tells us we don't have any money in the bank. What do I mean by this? We have reflections of the divine names. We don't actually have perfections. Only Allah has perfections. But unbelief and materialism, there is this belief that actually, as human beings, I have perfections. I have power. You know, my power grows as I grow. You know, my knowledge grows as I grow, and so on. But actually, if we read the Risale-i Nur, Ustad tells us, actually, no. Whatever you have is reflected. It's not given to you. It's reflected on you, and therefore we don't own anything. This is why he says that we are ajiz and we are faqir. And also Quran calls us jahul and zalum. Zalum and jahul, it means we have nothing, but we have the endless possibility of reflecting. Now, all of these self-help books which are written and have been written since the early 20th century, after Freud and the others, you know, who tried to prove that actually we do have something ourselves. You know, these are all premised on the idea that you have money in the bank and you can grow that money. In other words, you have perfections in you that you can make better and better and better, right? You have those things, but we don't have them. This is why we need Allah. This is why we need prayer. This is why we need belief. We have nothing. You can't grow anything. You can't grow something that you don't have. You can't make interest on money that you don't have in the bank. We don't have the Asma Husna. They're not in us. We reflect them. We have nothing, and we are nothing. But we have the endless ability to reflect. And this is what Ustad is telling us. This is why we need spirituality. This is why we need belief. This is why we need conviction. This is why we need submission. if you think that you have the attributes in some form in you, you know, like people say, I'm knowledgeable, but Allah is very knowledgeable. No, you're not knowledgeable at all. You don't have any knowledge. Knowledge is absolutely belonging to Allah. He is the absolute knowledgeable. And if you have anything at all, it's a reflection. You cannot increase your knowledge because it's not your knowledge. If we don't understand this, then we've lost. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. So let me give you an example. Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us a baby. He is 8 months old.
MashaAllah.
And I look at him and see his reactions and his actions, the way he cries and things like that. He's so weak. A baby, it's so weak. And I sometimes try to compare myself with him. And I see I'm not very much different than him. I just have a different, you know, as grown-up people, we just have the ability to justify or rationalize the same reactions that we have. There are babies inside of us, or we are also a baby in a different way. But we just have the ability as we grow up to cover them up, to cover our sorrows and misfortunes, or you know, our cryings inside. And we also have very childish, baby-like needs and wantings and desires and emotions, but we just have the ability to justify or rationalize them. We're not very much different than those babies, and we are just like, in terms of neediness, impotence, it's a good reflection for me to see him in that way and to put myself in his position. So we are very in need, and we need Allah in every time and every moment and every incident. And in the prayer, the times of the prayer are particular times to express them and to realize our weaknesses.
So you're saying that we're big babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we get questions. People say, you know, if Allah doesn't need anything, why does He need our prayer? As if like this is something we do for Allah. Is actually we need prayer. Allah doesn't, of course, need anything. So in a sense that the way Nursi explained it here, he explained our very reality of, you know, who we are in terms of our, you know, impotence, neediness, you know, relationship and desires and, you know, wishes. And then saying that if this is your nature, then you really can't do it without God. You can do it without prayer. And you have to start your day with the prayer, because otherwise you're just paralyzed. So I think that is very interesting way to really look at the prayer. But again, the problem here, if you're being told that you're powerful, you have the power, you know, unleash your power, and this has been told to you again and again, you start to think that you have power until you really, you know, face certain calamity and disease or ultimately death, and realize it was all, you know, it was all actually a lie, that you don't have anything. So I think that in this regard, you see there's a kind of self-deceptions going on, and become part of this, you know, this self-help guru that deceiving people that they're really powerful. They don't need a creator. So I think it's essential here to really, you know, to look at this Nursi's emphasis from the very first word when he talks about ajz mutlaq, faqr mutlaq, which means absolute, you know, impotence, absolute poverty, which means, you know, absolutely you have no power, no possession. So I think this realization, it seems like, the more we realize it, the more we can appreciate the prayer, and we can benefit from the prayer as well.
Yeah,
I think that we often forget that, you know, there is a Hizbullah and there is a Hizbul Shaitan, and that these forces are in Alam al-Malakut. Everything that happens in our realm is a reflection of what's happening in Malakut. And Ustad talks about the upheavals and revolutions which are happening there. And we can only imagine what's going on in Alam al-Malakut that gets reflected in this world. But you can see it, you can see it in how people are in the world and how various currents are, and what's happening in the world, and different trends and different fashions and different social political movements, different cultural movements. You can see that there is a vast keshmakesh, I don't know the English word, pulling and pushing maybe going on in Alam al-Malakut, and it's all reflected not just in the world but reflected in every single one of us. Allah is muqallib al-qulub. He turns our hearts all the time. So there are ups and downs, and there is flux and constant movement, and all of this is happening, and we need to anchor ourselves. And the 5 prayers are anchoring and grounding ourselves, rather than being swept away by these currents, which are just swirling around us, like floodwater all the time. So this is about grounding ourselves in reality, I think.
Yeah. So there are many
Okay,
veils, right?
Sorry, just wanted to add some brief note, and my understanding from as well that from that chapter paragraph. Can you hear me well?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say add a couple things. I feel like my understanding actually that I live in a dark room in our daily life or my daily life, meaning that I just only guess some of the things, but I don't know what's going to happen. All the hardships and challenges and enemies and lots of things is happening in our daily life. And in dark room, when you pray, worship, this is the my description of the whole world and the life of the world or my life. And when you start worshiping, you're turning on the light in the room, in dark room. Then you can say Allahu Akbar or Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Then everything is turning into just we can see and what's happening and to us, and as well as the whole thing. So based on the ajz and fakr, that we have nothing to do and we have really powerless, and then we cannot do anything except that the worshiping gives us the power, and just relying on and trusting Allah subhanallah wa ta'ala, saying, okay, hasbi Allah, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, when we start praying, worshiping, that salah is going to give us that power. That's what I was understanding. And we live in that, although that in this world we can guess some of the things, but it is completely dark. We're driving right now, we don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. Or we're going to the work, we don't know what's going to happen in the work. We know we believe in qadar. It's obvious, alhamdulillah, we have iman as well. That's making us really, really happy here and hereafter as well. But now, what I believe is that I feel like we are in the dark room, and really we don't guess anything, and we have no power, nothing, and we cannot control anything. That's the biggest thing that I feel like I have no control over anything. Even like people's talking, we cannot control. So that in that dark room, dark life, daily life, Fajr and Zuhur, and I can describe each one of them, but we are talking about the Fajr, that all the everything that after I woke up, alhamdulillah, I woke up, and when I start Allahu Akbar, trying to do the Salah, and when I say alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, I feel kind of like alhamdulillah, that's something that I am up, Allah just gave me a time, another time, and that is just a turning on the light in the dark room. This is what I wanted to say. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
That's a
Thank
great
you.
explanation, mashallah.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So we are at the end of our discussion for today. Necat Hocam, would you like to add anything?
No, I think that's very good,
Okay.
everyone. All the points is really great. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Yeah, we tend to think sometimes when you're in our ghafla, it's like a burdensome duty that we just need to, do it and continue our lives. But in fact, in reality, once you start reading these things and try to reflect on this, it's the most beautiful and bountiful and sweet feeling that we should run into, run towards, rush to the salah, to namaz, to prayer. So may Allah give us that understanding to rush
add
to prayer.
one meaning regarding your point, Mustafa. Sorry.
What's that?
Rasulullah, he is defining salah as qurrati aini. You remember the hadith? Three things are Allah made me love, and one of them is salah, qurrat aini. He's saying that the sweetness of the eye. So when he has a sorrow and any kind of a problem, he would rush to salah. He would rush to the presence of Allah. So may Allah make us, inshallah, understand this meaning that we can find the tranquility only in the presence of Allah. Right?
Amin. Amin, inshallah. Okay, so subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha.